The subject is very important, and it's a women session. In history, women participated in wars in a fighting role or non-fighting role. In the Second World War, more than 800,000 from the Soviet Union participated in the war, and many of them had a fighting role, while the alliance didn't allow women to have a fighting role. What is noticeable is that the United States until 2013 was not allowing women to participate in direct fight. It's only in 2013 that they stopped this interdiction. In the decades after the Second World War, the participation in women in wars increased, and this session, which I have the honor to conduct, so it is a women participation session, and the role of the military in the smaller states. So it's an occasion to know the role in peacetime, like in Qatar and Croatia, and also during the resistance of Palestinian. We have the participation in researchers who are working in the armed forces of their countries, and this will enrich the conversation. We start the session with Professor Yara Nassar, who is the coordinator for the she's the editor. She has masters in political sciences from the Doha Institute. She focuses on the Palestinian and Gulf studies. She will have a paper, The Woman in the Palestinian Resistance. Good morning, and thanks for this presentation. So today's subject is the women in the armed resistance, Palestinian armed resistance, and their role in that resistance. Two parts in my presentation. The literature about the role of women in military conflicts or in the asymmetric also conflicts. So this is the case of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. In the second part, I will talk about the conditions in which women joined the military action, and I will talk about the military Palestinian resistance and when they started having a military activity. Maybe before that, I will talk about the participation. It's about terms and having military or political roles through conveying news and the transport of weaponry, cleaning them and maintaining them, and also gathering information and transporting fighters from a place to another. While working on this, I found that it is not interesting to start all what women have been doing from the beginning, because there are differences between areas. The paper is a little bit holistic, but we try to draw a map for this action, the action of women. There are some publications and compare different cases and individual cases. Literature reflects a complex situation of women in asymmetric or asymmetrical conflicts. So it is a very narrow look at the role of women, and they usually rely on the macro vision. Then for the reduced scale wars, as for the women who join the military, and we notice that there is a focus on the women's role. There were many studies and analysis in comparative studies, and how the factors of sex, ethnical aspects contribute to the differentiation between the roles of women, and the modern studies have a reduced scheme. It also reflects reduced options in the possibility for women to participate. The question about the participation in the participation of women, we have a number of publications here about the marginalization of the role of women in such military actions or armed movements, and analyzing also the conditions and the circumstances of their participation, as well as their roles as main actors. Then the recruitment, the participation in fighting. Most of this literature agree on the participation of women is important for understanding the nature of conflicts, and the Palestinian case is also mentioned in this regard, especially the situation of the participation of women in non-state groups with regard to the policies that are adopted by those non-state movements. The Palestinian women role in military resistance or armed resistance appears in many books. Here are examples of those publications. I focus on this role. As for the studies which documented the participation of women, they are not numerous, and generally it speaks about the general role of the women. Historically, geographically also, there are schemes which often come back in those studies. There is the context of the participation of women in the armed resistance, as well as their contribution. There are some of the publications which adopted the point of view of women and the importance of their role, and how the gender crossings intervened in the military actions in the Arab world, and in particular the Palestinians, especially in the civil war in Lebanon, with the system not allowing women to take part to the military activities. Many other people, many other publications notice the importance of the role of women. Also, the way the women fighters are viewed with regard to the military action or to the resistance. There are also ideological aspects which are important in understanding the reasons which make women participate. There are also certain stages in this in the history of this participation. There is a point before the 20s of the last century under the British colonization. The women participated in demonstration against British occupation. It took many forms, like gathering contributions, demonstrating, etc. As for the social background of those women, this continued, and we noticed that even farmers contributed by hiding weapons, transporting the fidayin or the fighters, like Fatima Khalil Ghazal, who was killed in Wadi Adnun battle in 1936 by the British, while other women supported the fighting groups like Fatima Ghazal. And there are some also publications which mention the existence of women organization, like the Azden Qassam one, which it is said that it trained them on carrying weapons and using them. And there was also an interview with two well-known women, but it was not a frame, but the presence of women around Al-Qassam was mentioned. We have an experience before the Nakba. There was the first women organization which conducted or participated into armed attacks against Jewish bands or groups.
If in the period from 1948 to 1965, the involvement of women became less, and many women were more concerned with survival than actually taking part in political activism. And from 1965 onwards, the culture of resistance became more prevalent, and the PLO came into existence, and they started camps to train women in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Then, and later on, there was a pivotal event in 1968 after the 1967 military defeat, and the women's role in fighting, reconnaissance, gathering intelligence has increased. Shadia Abu Ghazal, for example, who joined the Arab nationalist movement and then the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and she used to hide fighters in her home or gather intelligence and deliver food to the fighters, and then She formed the first fighting unit in Nablus by Randan Nabulsi. She was interviewed later, and she said the turning point to her was the 1967 war. She was trained by Fatah, then the, for the people who belonged to different fronts fought with each other, and one of the early fighters who joined Fatah, we have Aisha Oda from the Popular Front, we have Aiza Saad, and until she was, in addition to a number of women who carried out attacks, Aida Saad in Gaza, Layla Khalid 1969, Amin Dahpour, Therese Halassa. Even the Hebrew press wrote about the discovery of women networks. The third stage was the appearance of women who carried out suicide attacks or martyrdom operations, who got trained in Beirut, and some of them were planning to drive a car bomb into the Israeli Prime Minister's office, for example. Then we had the case of Ahlam al-Tamimi, who carried out some. Of course, by this time, the Islamist factions began to appear, and then the Wafa Idris was the first woman to carry out a martyrdom operation. She was part of Shuhada al-Quds, the Fatah armed wing, Reem Riyashi and Heba Daragma, who attacked the Afula Center. She was Salah al-Quds member of Nidal Frehat, who also she hid fighters, and she fired Qassam rockets on Israeli settlements. Women, Palestinian women, got involved in the armed struggle from an early stage. Then they developed their work into hijacking airplanes, and there is the question, was women's participation merely symbolic, or was it really an active role they played? I think it was an active role. Sometimes they did the things that men could not do. So this was their contribution. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yara and Nassar, for respecting the time limit and shedding light on Palestinian women's participation. The second paper is by Fatima Al-Nuaimi. She is from the Ministry of Defense in Qatar. She will be speaking on the role of women in Qatari armed forces, opportunities and challenges. And she has contributed to different articles, and she will be talking today on the role of women in the Qatari armed forces, opportunities and challenges. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fatima Naimi. Thank you for the introduction. This is the first time I'm invited to an academic event. Today I will try to link between theory and practice, and I'll be speaking on the role of women in the Qatari armed forces, opportunities and challenges. The military organization has always been a place of discipline, institutionalism, and it's not just an apparatus to protect the country, but it redefines the role of the genders when traditionally men were viewed as the warriors, as the fighters and protectors, and women were allocated more traditional roles. Of course, this view has developed later on, and I'll try and pose some questions and try and give answers. There was those who thought that the lack of women participation in armed forces increased the gender gap and the domination of men in this regard. In the second direction, there was another argument that women's participation in the armed forces redefines the role of women and the gender gaps. Also, the nature of modern warfare, like cyber warfare, the use of drones, raises other questions that does the role of fighting is exclusive to those who are physically strong, for example. In view of these views, the integration of Qatari women into the armed forces came in considering this experience and whether or not it can create an important change in or just a mere symbolic participation. This is Mariam Yusuf. She is the first officer, and the title is Will the Participation of Women Create the Kind of Change and the patriarchic nature of society? Because in the past, the armed forces reinforced this traditional view because the leadership roles were exclusively given to men. Yet, in the last few decades, this view has been changing, and the participation of women has begun to change, not only in Western countries, but in some Arab countries and the Gulf countries, and the Qatari women began to join the armed forces. Yet the question remains, the decision to integrate women on its own is not enough. And we have to ask, can women play the role as efficiently as men when given these roles? And what does this mean in the long term for the Qatari society when women start joining the armed forces? And will this be a real change or just a mere quick fix or a quick response? Why does Qatar need the integration of women in its army? From a social point of view, this is important, yet it has a strategic implication because Qatar, as many other small countries, faces challenges in just depending on men alone to have a strong national army. Also, the geopolitical changes in the region makes it incumbent on Qatar to consolidate its security and its defense policies and not rely exclusively on foreign alliances. For this reason, Qatar has a mixture of strong military relations with foreign countries like the US and Turkey, and at the same time expand the human resources, and especially women in the armed forces. And we really need to view the recent past to understand this change and how it's happening. To understand the aspects of including and integrating women, we really understand the Ministry of Defense was started in 1977, although when Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani was appointed Minister of Defense in 1971. So even from that early stage, they started building an army and then gradually developed to defending the country, and the duty of the Qatari Armed Forces focused on protecting national sovereignty, which later developed in accordance to the developments in the region. Now, the Qatari Armed Forces play a role which was not part of their role decades ago, like helping in disaster situations, providing aid, providing security for major events like the World Cup. So when women started being integrated into the army in 2018, the space allowed to women to develop their capabilities and have more opportunities became even bigger. The structural changes in the military doctrine of any country is by necessity a reflection of the relationship between the state, society, and the community. And for this reason, 2018 is a turning point in the history of Qatar, because integrating women was not just a continuation of the rhetoric of gender equality, but to re engineer the defense structure of the country and the role of having a sustainable defense policy. A small country like Qatar has always faced a challenge in maintaining its security and the need to be part of alliances in a region known for its lack of stability. And this meant that Qatar had to build its own effective armed forces, yet the demographic challenge has always been an obstacle, and for this reason, recruiting women to the armed forces has become a necessity, and this is part and parcel of reconstructing the role. So instead of focusing women in the army on non-combatant roles, then this was developed later to some combat roles and engineering, medical support units, and others. This change cannot be read in isolation from the attempt to reconstruct the armed forces. And the question is not just about integrating women, but to enable the army to reproduce itself in a more comprehensive manner, to allow women to work alongside men without creating challenges for the armed forces. Because of the changes in the nature of modern warfare, and it's no longer just a physical strength thing, now there is the other capabilities in technology, flying drones, for example, analytical skills, and this enhances the logic of integrating women and allowing them a role in intelligence analysis, defense technology aspects. And there are some steps that the Qatari armed forces are employing. Now, we have two tracks, one a military one and one a civilian within the army, and we have the Joan Academy plays a role in training cadets to be officers, and lately they allowed women to join, and also allowing women to volunteer to the professional army has opened doors to women. Despite that, there are, however, obstacles which does not allow women to hold high positions of command. So we want to pose the question, to what extent are we tackling the real issues? Finally, integrating women into the Qatari armed forces. This constitutes a challenge by guaranteeing women's participation on the one hand and safeguarding the efficiency of the army as a fighting machine. I think currently the women's participation in the army is fairly recent, and we cannot measure the success yet. But as a step, is a progressive one. The challenges are still there, and we really want to see an active role of women in the defense strategy of the country. And it's a sign of development, yet it's still facing obstacles and challenges when it comes to legislation, restructuring the army. Yet the success will mean that the army is able to cope with these challenges and allow women to play a more constructive role. Thank you very much, and thank you for respecting the time line, and thank you for the questions you posed and answered. Now we move to two more participants. These two ladies are members of the armed forces. Please, they'll be presenting in English.
We're now moving to the third paper with Mariia Chekh, or Mariia Chekh. She's a researcher and a soldier. She holds a master's degree of military studies. She has served in the 12th Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard since 2017. In May 2022, she was captured by the Russian forces while she was helping defend Mariupol city. She spent 1 year in Russian prisons, and in May 2023, she was freed and exchanged back to Ukraine. Ms. Mariia will be presenting a paper titled Women in the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Evolution, Challenges, and Field Experience. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I must say that I'm a soldier, not speaker, so I will try to make my speech more brief, short, and maybe to leave some time for questions in case, of course, if you have some. First of all, I would like to thank the host of this meeting and all the friends of Ukraine gathered here. We sincerely appreciate Qatar's continuous efforts in humanitarian diplomacy. The role of Qatar has played in helping secure the return of Ukrainian children, advocating for the missing, and ensuring that our prisoners of war can communicate with their families and community. Qatar has proven that dialogue and diplomacy can save lives, and we are truly grateful for your leadership in these efforts. The war didn't begin in Ukraine in 2022, as you all know. It started in 2014. For me, as for many other Ukrainians, the first battle was in Maidan, in the center of Kiev. We were fighting for our democratic future, for freedom. I stand there alongside, together with my husband. First, it started just as peaceful demonstrations. And for example, personally me, I was reading a poem, I was reading my own poems in front of other demonstrators, and other guys were filming these poems, but later it became much more dangerous. For example, during the day the whole square was filled with people, but as night fell, many left, so night was much more dangerous. Most provocations and attacks happened after dark. My husband feared for my safety, and so he didn't want me to stay through the freezing nights, because it was winter in Ukraine, when the risks of being actually captured by pro-Yanukovych police or assaulted by water cannons in sub-zero temperatures. That time it was around minus 15, minus 20 degrees sometimes. So the risk was high. Even before January 22, when actually first protesters were killed, we knew the cost of resistance. That's why I joined another group of people who protested, because I still wanted to continue my resistance. And after this, he said, okay, join us. It would be more safe if you stay in our group, and at least I can control something. So women played a critical role in Maidan. Some of them cooked, some tended to wounded, and some were ready to fight from the very beginning. Later, many of them joined army. Maidan was more than protest. It became the training ground for a new generation of soldiers. It was there that the definition of Ukraine's new defenders started. The story of Ukrainian women in Ukrainian armed forces is a story of bravery, determination, and breaking barriers. For generations, Ukraine, as many nations, had traditional views for military service. But when our country faced Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the occupation of part of our homeland, it wasn't about gender, it was about duty. Women stood shoulder to shoulder with men, proving that defending our homeland is the responsibility for everyone. Women joined volunteer battalions, which prevented Ukraine from falling in the first months of war. It was really crucial, and picked up weapons and went to the front lines. The war forced a rethink. At first, the system struggled to adapt. But Ukrainian women were proven their strength and resilience. The motivation for many of them was quite different. So some wanted to be closer to their families, to their sons, fathers, husbands. And some wanted to have a revenge for dead members of the family. For example, one of our soldiers of our 12th Brigade, of National Guard of Azov, she joined our unit after her son was dead, and she had no sense of life. That's why she joined us to help other soldiers and to find some new meaning to live. Also some women just were born to be warriors and wanted to fight for their country. Personally, I thought that what was happening to Ukraine, it was completely unfair, so I wanted justice, and that was my main motivation. Then came the Invisible Battalion. It was advocacy and human rights public project about Ukrainian women soldiers in the war against Russia. It highlighted the role of women in combat and pushed for changes. And due to its significant public impact, women were officially allowed to serve in combat roles like sniper, tank operator, reconnaissance officer, grenade launcher, or operator, and more. Additionally, women were officially granted the right to hold general officer's position in the armed force. By 2021, over 22% of Ukrainians military was female. Today, over 67,000 women wear the uniform, and more than 10,000 are involved in combat missions, are in front lines. The Ukrainian armed forces have embraced this transformation. Reforms are ongoing to ensure women have equal opportunities and proper recognition. The military is working to address challenges like equipment and uniforms designed for women. And public support has also grown. For example, in 2018, only about half of Ukrainians believed that women should have equal rights in the army. But by 2023, that number has risen to 80%. 81% of respondents believe that women can command a combat unit just like men. And before 2018, Ukrainian military uniforms were made for men only. Female soldiers had to adjust them to wear ill-fitting gear. The issue was finally addressed, and today Ukrainian women have uniforms, boots, and body armor designed to fit them properly. As for me, I never demanded some special military uniform, but for example, I used more light version of armor protection, and also, for example, I used instead of Kalashnikov AK, I used AKS shorter. So we used more lighter armor and lighter weapons, and for me it worked well. And it's not just about uniforms. Training opportunities for women have expanded. More female soldiers now receive specialized training. They learn how to lead, how to operate advanced weapons, and how to strategize in combat. This investment is paying off. Many women now hold command positions, something that would have been almost unthinkable just a decade ago. There are still some problems in inviting women to the combat units. Combat commanders report that they have to build some additional facilities if there is a mixed gender team, and also it takes extra space for the place where soldiers and officers can rest if there are some women. So still can be challenging for women to join the units, because we need to work harder to prove that we are effective. Let's highlight some women making history in the Ukrainian military today. Take Yulia Mikitenko, for example, one of Ukrainian's first female frontline commanders, who started as civil activist during the Revolution of Dignity in Maidan. She's a commander of an unmanned aerial vehicle platoon. While Ukrainian women in the military are proving their strength on the battlefield, many of them are also enduring the horrors of captivity. Women taken as prisoners of war by Russia face inhumane treatment, systematic torture, and all kinds of abuse, and severe violations of international humanitarian principles. The Geneva Convention mandates that POWs be held in special camps. Yet Ukrainian female soldiers, like their male counterparts, are instead kept in regular prisoners alongside common criminals. Unfortunately, me too have lived through this experience. After fighting the Battle of Mariupol for 86 days, 82 of which we were completely surrounded, we had no way to receive supplies, ammunition, or even food or medicine. A few helicopters managed to reach us with minimal support, but soon even that fragile connection disappeared. So we were actually slowly dying, knowing that from military standpoint, the blockade was impossible. 70% of our personnel were heavily wounded. Nearly everyone bore injuries or concussions. And yet, through all this, it was women who helped the men keep their morale high, who made sure hope that we didn't die. Sometimes, in impossible situation, a single small gesture can carry immense weight. From my personal observations, women can tolerate much strong long-term stress than men. In the beginning of Mariupol battle, they were kind of vulnerable, losing some amount of comfort. But really, in crucial situations, they proved their big strengths. And I had a mission from one of our commanders to tell one female soldier that her husband just died in the battle. He was quite concerned about this because we needed to keep morale high, and but we couldn't predict her reaction. So he asked me to do it gently as I could. And I was surprised that she was completely calm and stable. And it was she was after this she was involved she was involved in even more helping other soldiers to cure their wounds. I spent I'm sorry. Yeah, unfortunately, one of the women who was with us, she was pregnant, and her husband also died in battle. And seeing her grief, my husband asked a wounded soldier to support her. It gave him purpose because in helping others, we often help ourselves. By the end of Mariupol battle, we had no ammunition, no supplies, and not even to defend our positions or protect our wounded brothers and sisters. So on May 17, under direct order from President Zelensky, our garrison surrounded to Russian forces. We were promised humane treatment under the Geneva Conventions, but that promise was never kept. I personally endured torture during interrogations and also during transportations, and also sometimes just for fun. It was including electric shocks, rubber batons, iron pipes, a Morning Star analog. And also sometimes they kind of invented new weapons for us, and before torturing us, they announced that they have something special for today. And also there were chains and physical beatings, denial of food and water for days. And we were forced to stand without sitting or lying down or waiting for permission. So that's why the legs of many prisoners of war were swallowing, and it was really painful and difficult. And also it was included naked photographs, humiliation, and the deliberate torture of women in front of men, and vice versa. They committed acts so vile that a normal human mind could even conceive them. But everything ends sooner or later, and I was eventually changed and returned to my homeland after 1 year of prison and torturing. And now I stand before you willing to share my experience. Actually, I was exchanged together with my brothers and sisters in arms, were exchanged for 45 of us, were exchanged for 3 Russian pilots who were bombing my native city. And I must say that even in prison, women played a vital role. When men learned that women were also being tortured, it fueled their resistance. They became angry, but they became even more stronger. When we had brief chances to communicate, but sometimes we had possibilities to communicate through cameras or during prisoners' transportations. So we tried to encourage men. And because for strong men, losing control is one of the hardest things to endure. Today, the war continues. Ukraine faces a new challenge. We need more soldiers, but society is not ready to fully mobilize women. Currently, only women in specific roles, like primarily medical personnel, are subject to mobilization. So the debates are still continuing. Our unit, the 12th Brigade of National Guard of Azov, consists of not mobilized people only, but volunteers. So we involve people, more people. We prefer to use people who joined arm voluntarily because they show more professionalism, more willing to learn, and so they really want to fight. That's why I think it's better. So I think Ukraine should pay more attention for different kinds of mobilization programs for women to involve them. So war evolves, and new times demand new approaches. Justice, mercy, and the human treatment of prisoners are values shared by all great civilization and faiths. Therefore, we call on the international community to act quickly and decisively. Women in Ukraine uniform who has sacrificed so much cannot be abandoned of the horrors of captivity. If we recognize the strength of Ukrainian women in battle, we must also fight for their right to return home. Today, I appeal to the esteemed leaders, diplomats, and friends gathered here today. Please continue using your voices, your influence, and your compassion to ensure that all children, captured civilians, and prisoners of war, regardless of nationality, are treated with dignity and returned home. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights on the role of women in Ukrainian armed forces, and special thanks for sharing your own experience, a painful one. And thank you also for the advocacy notes in your conclusion. The fourth and last paper will be delivered by Ivana Kovačević, Bekić. Sorry for the pronunciation. Ms. Bekić is first lieutenant in the Croatian Army and a PhD candidate in media and communications at the University of North Croatia. Her first duty was a platoon commander for ground-based air defense. She is currently training officer in the operations department in the cyber command of the Croatian Army. Ms. Bekić will be presenting a paper titled Women in the Defense System of the Republic of Croatia.
As it is said, is women in defense system in the Republic of Croatia. So, presentations. Okay. So, I will wait a second just that you can see the photo, because I put here is 28 countries, so I put the world map to see where is my country, my small country. Okay, you can see it here. So I will start with the content of my today's presentation. I will tell you something about the Republic of Croatia, our national security structures, and women's participation in it, women in leadership positions in Croatian Army, and also some gender differences in psychophysical strength assessments and in unit. And I will tell you something about military service in the Republic of Croatia, so how can also men and women entry in our army. And I will conclude the topic. So for the beginning, the Republic of Croatia is state in southern Eastern Europe. Our neighbors are Slovenia, Hungary, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Italian Republic, with which we share Adriatic Sea. The capital city is Zagreb, and we have 3.8 million people, of which 51% is women. We are part of NATO since 2009, and also we are part of the European Union since 2013. So Croatia, unfortunately, has to fight for her independence, even though in 1990s, on first democratic elections, Croatia elected Croatian Democratic Union and wanted to be independent from the Yugoslavia. But for her independence, we have to fight. The Homeland War lasted from 1991 to 1995, and since the beginning of the war, women participate in it. when we talk about national security structures, the national security framework of Republic of Croatia compromises institutions vested with corrective powers, such as Ministry of Defense, Croatian Army, Police, Ministry of the Interior, and intelligence services, both military and civilian. Also, women participate in it, all of them equally as the men. So today, Croatian Army is an example of small modern army. And during the war, according to the Ministry of Croatian Veterans, 23,000 of women participate in Croatian war. Today, just to compare the numbers, today Croatian Army has 15,000 military personnel, so it's a high number. From this number, 61% were in combat sector, and the rest of the women were in support, medicine, supplies, personal affairs, and so on. 127 women died in homeland war, and 1,000 gained the status of war invalid. So let's start with the laws and legislative. So the first document that aimed to define the position of women within defense systems is the United Nations Security Council, known as Resolution 1325. With the adoption of the resolution, the UN Security Council for the first time recognized that the improvement of women and protection of their rights constitute matters of international law and security. The key provision of resolutions are to increase representation of women at all levels of decision-making, mandates the expansion of women's roles and contributors in United Nations field operations, incorporating a gender perspective in peacekeeping operations, adopt a gender-sensitive approach, provide member states with guidelines and training materials on the protection, rights, and special needs of women, ensuring the Security Council missions integrated gender perspectives, be responsible of all states to combat, inputting, and persecute individuals responsible for acts of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. In 2019, the government of Croatia adopted a new national action plan for the implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. The NEP provides a framework for the coordinated and structured action of the Republic of Croatia in the implementation of the women, peace, and security agenda, both the national and foreign policies. So when we discuss the protection of women, government of Croatia has several laws to protect women's rights: anti-discrimination law, gender equality law, and for women in Croatian Army, law on service in armed forces of Republic of Croatia. The Ministry of Defense has also appointed a gender equality coordinator, so that's the person, which primary responsibility is the coordination to oversee the implementation of gender equality law and the national policy for the promotion of gender equality. And thanks to legal framework, we can see from annual report on defense from 2022 that in Croatian Army there are 40% of active women, and from cadets 24% are women, so they are the future officer as well. In Ministry of Defense, there is 50% of civil employees that are women, and from all scholarships, 26% of women are on graduated or postgraduate studies programs. You can see these numbers as well here. So women in leadership positions in Croatia, so since our establishment, we only had one Ministry of Defense that was women, and that was Željka Antunović, who held the position from 2002 to 2004. 2015, Brigadier Gordana Garašić received the rank of general, and she was the first woman in Croatian army that received that rank. Since then, no other woman in Croatian army has been promoted to the rank of general. This year, I would say, begins great for the women in Croatian army. So in January, for the first time, a woman was appointed as warrant officer in Croatian Air Force as the senior enlisted leader. So it's the first time in Croatian army that women held that position, and warrant officer Ivana was in Croatian army since the beginning of the war. So it's a great example that long-term career pay off. And this month, Croatian contingent was deployed to NATO Forward Land Force Battle Group in Hungary, and under the command of Colonel Mirna Bajčetić-Janski, also first time that the woman was in command for one Croatian contingent in NATO mission. Not only civil members and military personnel, we also have our University of Defense and Security there, Dr. Franjo Tuđman, named after our first president. And according to my research from the last year, women participate in it in roles of assistants or professors in lead, accounted for approximately 22%, and the rest are the men. So if we compare professors and civil officers and military officer, it's military officers are 10% less than the civils. So differences, gender differences in Croatian army. Croatian army has 2 times a year physical fitness assessments in 3 categories: push-ups, sit-ups, and running. The specific criteria that must be done depend about the year of the people and unit, and also about the gender. Only sit-ups are equal for men and women. Only unit in Croatia that women participate only in planning and administrations are Special Force Command due to difficult physical training to enter the Special Force Command, known as Commando, that lasts 6 months, and no woman can apply, but unfortunately can't finish due to our biological differences. So military service in Croatia, in Republic Croatia. Today in Croatia, Croatia don't have mandatory military service, but it is planned to, by the end of this year, Ministry of Defense plan to set obligatory military service. It will be obligatory for men. Women can voluntarily if they want. At the present, both men and women can enter the military system of Croatia in 3 ways. The first way is to become soldier or NCO, and it's called voluntary military training, and minimum requirements are secondary educations. A second way is enrolling in undergraduate or graduated military studies at University of Defense and Security, Dr. Franjo Tuđman, studies such as military engineering, military leaderships and management, and so on. And the third way is applying for the officer basic training program upon completing a civil undergraduate or graduated degree. So to conclude, I would say that Croatian army is today a small professional army that's built from a big force who fought for our independence. And thankfully, in the last 30 years, Croatia implemented the guidelines of the United Nations Security Council resolution, and through the gender equality law, law on service in armed forces, and defense law, Croatia has ensured that men and women within the defense system have equal rights. And thank you for your attention, and I have just one short story from my own experience. So in this picture you can see me. I know that maybe you don't recognize me. You see now blonde, small woman, and here you see military officer. So in 2020, I was platoon commander of ground-based air defense, and our troop prepared for international military exercise called STIT, or in England, SHIELD. And my ex-instructor, and at that time NCO, knew that there was enough Strela 2M, so it's short-range missile. And he was very wisdom, and we were at lunch, and he told me, you know, why wouldn't you shoot? Maybe you would be the first woman in Croatian army. I'm not sure, but officer for sure first. So I asked my commander, but he was, okay, you will be in exercise, but in planning, not as a shooter. So in army, we can't skip the chain. But I'm not only an officer, I also I finished journalism, so I skipped the chain, and I asked my brigadier, and he, okay, Ivana, from Monday you are on training, so I have opportunity to shoot, and it's not that big deal as it may look, but what I wanted to point out, just be persistent and learn and knowledge and persistence will pay off at the time. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for walking us through the armed forces in Croatia and the role of women, and for sharing your own experience as well. So now we have some time, about 10 minutes, to take some questions, 4 to 5 questions, and then you will have about 2 minutes to interact with them. So, okay, we'll start from here, and then gentlemen. I see many hands there, so go ahead, please. Second. And please introduce yourself.
Yes, I have a question for Ivana and a question for Mariia. I want to know
Microphone.
I want to know, in one sense, the strategy and the tactics of the army and the Croatia country changed by the participation of women. And for Mariia, the introduction of women in the army also changed the relation with Europe.
I think we take the answers. Yeah, I mean, I just, can you please repeat the question for me? Sorry.
Excuse me?
Please say it again.
Time,
yeah.
I want to hear if the relation with the European countries changed by the participation of women.
Thank you.
السلام عليكم. سؤالي موجه للأخت فاطمة النعيمي.
For Mrs. Fatima Naimi, thank you for the presentation. We have an experience in Qatar, which is the civil service. So what do you think about the participation of women in the civil service? At the beginning it was for 3 months, now it's for 1 year.
First of all, Ms. Ivana and Mariia, thank you for your service. I would like to ask about the military organizational culture of your country. So South Korea has the male conscription system, and we also have confucian tradition, which values highly the masculinity and patriarchy. So despite the lots of effort to introduce women into the military, we still have many problems in the military. For example, according to my recent survey, the South Korean military has benevolent sexism rather than gender egalitarianism. So I'm wondering which between gender egalitarianism and benevolent sexism is closer to your country's military organizational culture. So if your military still has a kind of benevolent sexism, so how can we overcome this problem to better introduce women into the military?
Thank you. Question in the back. Excellency Ambassador. Ukraine.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I am Andrei Kuzmenko, Ukrainian ambassador. I'm really proud to see here a beautiful lady from Ukraine. This is rather not the question. I would like just to extend my appreciations for these so different ladies, which are so deep in their love for their nations and for their motivation to defend their own nations. This is important. Unfortunately, the majority of the wars were started by the men, and war has not the ladies' face. And unfortunately, 21st century gives us a very difficult situation when, along with men, ladies has to be in the front line. The only things which we can do, the only way to avoid the further aggravation of the situation when even kids has to be fighting for their lives if the international law fail. This is the international system of law, law-based system, territorial integrity of countries, respect for the unity of countries, and of course, everything what we can do to avoid military conflicts. Thank you so much, and one more time, beautiful ladies, thank you for your self-sufficient service.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next question. Okay, right in the back. The last question. The lady in the back.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the panelists for sharing their papers. Excellent. My name is Ms. Babati. I'm from the Center for International Regional Studies. My question is for Fatima and Naimi. Fatima, I would like to begin with where you ended in saying that this is very new, since it was only in 2018 when the women were allowed to join into the army, whether for administrative roles, logistic roles, and non-combative roles. And I want to further expatiate that problem for you a bit, because defense sector has always also involved the non-Qataris when it came to the male gender, right? The male non-Qataris born in Qatar are allowed to join the army, whereas females that are non-Qataris have not been given that opportunity. So since Qatari women have now been given that opportunity, and I do understand the situation and the complexity is very new, but have there been conversations of allowing non-Qatari females to also join the army, given that they're born in the country, and this could be one of the opportunities to increase the potential of the army in Qatar, given that we're moving from the traditional routes to non-traditional routes of combat and defense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll start with you, and then we move to the right.
السؤال الأول بشأن الخدمة الوطنية. طبعا من 2015
service since 2018. It was the first step. Before 2018, there were administrative women working in the administrative field, and I think that national service came after a long study, but I think that through the development, strategic development for the military institution. The other question, there are challenges now for the participation of women in the military. I think we need more time to know if there is a way to non-Qatari women, but with the change of the nature of wars and roles, we might come to that.
Of Europeans, well, I think that yes, generally people feel more compassion for children and women if they are in kind of trouble and war, and being prisoner of war is also for sure it's difficult. But I cannot say that reaction particularly changed, because well, the whole Europe is interested in Ukrainian victory, I think, because it's the fact of stability of the region, and that's why the more people protect Ukraine, protect our land, the better. So the more women participate in armed forces of Ukraine, I think it will bring benefits for the whole region. And answering the second question about how to overcome gender inequality, I think there are two ways. So from side of women in the army, it's for sure it's professionalism, because as soon as we prove that we fight as good as men and in some positions better, it won't be a problem anymore, I think. And from another side, it's of course it's we should overcome some bureaucracy, but in general I think that situation is changing itself, because as soon as we need this, so around 50% of population of Ukraine, a little bit more than 50 are women. So again, to involve this force, it will be good for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. So for answer, you asked for strategic change. I think that in last 30 years, the biggest change for Croatia was law framework for women, not only in Croatian army, but in other parts of society Croatian. And also with the partnership with NATO, we adopted the resolution 1325, and I think I can say now that women in Croatia, in Croatian army, are equal, and I think that our male colleagues are supporting us. There are always someone who doesn't, and there are some men that still have a prejudice, and that's an answer to your questions. But I think the best way to fight is with your work. When you see me, short, blonde woman, so the prejudice are at the beginning. My male colleague who is 2 meters high and stronger than me looks like a military officer. I maybe don't at first, but in planning operations, even in tactical levels, when we were at the beginning of career as cadets, I lived in Croatian. I'm missing the word. I lived in space where army works for 5 years. So I wake up at 6 and go to sleep at 9. So we were equal. It wasn't any differences between us. But yes, still it is challenge sometimes.
Thank you so much. شكرا للحضور الكريم.
Thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you for your participation with us in this special session. And thank you for all those who are following us. Now we have the lunch break. The Next session will be at 3 o'clock. Thank you.